Thanks to my candle here, I should be able to find the light switch. Ah, there we go. With only a little effort, I found my way down to the basement of the old house. Although our little adventure with the lighting had seemed natural enough at the time, given the condition of the house, the prince's murder had colored all of the evening's happenings with a more sinister shading. Perhaps examining the house's electrical panel for myself would shed some light on the mystery. That must be the breaker panel. Let's take a closer look, shall we? I don't know much about this sort of thing, but it looks to me that all the switches are on, except for one. Well, fun as it would be to make the little girl faint again, I probably shouldn't touch them for now. The wiring is old, but it looks to me like it should all work. It's a bit of a mess, though. Hard to tell just what goes where. Hello. What have we here? It's an electrical timer. I once used one of these in the school breaker room to shut off the lights during my high school exams. You can use it to flip a breaker switch at a predetermined time. The question is, just what is it doing here? I'm starting to think our little blackout earlier might have been no accident after all. In the queen bedroom, I found my old social acquaintance, the Contessa. To say that I trusted her was going much too far. But I had certainly known her longer than anyone else there that evening. Besides that, I knew her to have an ear for gossip and an eye for detail. If there was anyone who could tell me a little more about the cast of our little drama, it was her.
There you are, Misfortunate, darling. I must say this whole affair is just dreadful, isn't it?
Tragic. Truly tragic.
Prince Titanico was an eccentric man, but he knew how to put on a show. Sadly, this is rather more than I expected, I'm afraid.
Are we really sure he didn't plan the whole thing after all? You know, have the last laugh, go out with a bang, that sort of thing?
Oh, no, my dear, I don't think so. The prince, by all accounts, was far too fond of himself for that.
Pity. It would have made for such a delicious story. Not to mention no longer having to worry about a possible killer being on the loose.
Quite so.
You know, it was really quite shocking. One minute the prince was playing host and telling ghost stories, and next thing you know, we all come running and he's dead on the floor.
Oh, indeed. That was a surprise of a most unpleasant nature.
Where were you when you heard the news? It was that one-eyed shambler in the ill-fitting coat who found me in the other bedroom. Did he find you first?
No. In fact, I was in here. And it was that young man with a decidedly orangish hue who brought me the news.
Our oh-so-helpful Horatio. He must have been done fixing the lights then.
Yes, they'd only just come on. I must say, he was in quite a state, with those robes of his flapping about everywhere. I expect I would have laughed if he didn't look so distressed.
Oh, alas, such a wasted opportunity.
Mind you, he didn't tell me exactly what the matter was at first. I'm not sure he knew himself. He only said that something had happened, and we had to gather everyone together right away.
And our two little darlings. You found them on the way back then?
Precisely. Just as we were coming back down to the main floor.
Well, it's good we've got that all straightened up. With so much running about the house, it's enough to make one's head spin trying to sort it all out.
Oh, my word, yes. I used to get quite bad headaches myself, especially back when I was with my second husband. Mind you, those only ever seemed to come on when he was telling golfing stories.
My dear, I know exactly what you mean. Darling, I have a little confession to make. Although I'd met our good host, ex-host, a number of times, I'm afraid I never really knew him, if you understand what I mean.
I hardly expect you're the only one in that situation, my dear. The prince had this maddening habit of talking all the time and yet somehow still saying very little.
So was he really a prince then? Do you know?
These days, title really does not mean what it once did. After all, how many do you have now?
Oh, let me see. At least 3. All by marriage, of course. Sometimes it can be hard to keep track.
Just so. No doubt our late prince could make some claim or another. But these days, who can't? Just about anyone can claim a tenuous connection to some great old family that was thought lost in the Revolution. And it's so hard to prove them wrong. And as long as there isn't money involved, no one much cares to try.
So he called himself a prince, and that's about all anyone knew. He wasn't married or anything, was he?
Good heavens, I hope not. You did see him doting all over our sweet little Charisse, didn't you?
Come now, Comtessa. You and I both know that's proof of nothing.
So cruel, but so true. Still, if he was ever married, I never heard of it.
And you do have such a knack for hearing interesting things, darling. If there was anything to hear, I dare say you would have heard it.
Oh, modesty forbids.
In any case, it would seem our late prince was quite the enigma then. At least I can feel glad that I wasn't the only one in the dark. So how did you know Prince Titanico then? I met him at an art auction myself. How about you?
Oh, I hardly knew him at all, really. He was an acquaintance of my late husband's. They played cards together sometimes at his club, or so I understand.
I see. Is this the first time you've seen him then, since your husband passed away?
Well, he came to the funeral, but other than that, yes. Yes, it is.
Don't you think it's a little odd that he would invite you out to a rather small event like this, when your husband was the one he actually knew?
He said he thought I would appreciate the historical nature of the estate, and he's not wrong on that count. Perhaps he may have also thought I'd be a little lonely, being recently widowed and all. That part's nonsense, of course. A woman in my position gets rather used to it. But it's sweet of the dear boy to try.
Yes, indeed. One does get used to it. Husbands come and go. It's the way of the world, really.
Too true.
I don't know about you, but I can't shake the impression that Miss Charisse was, for lack of a better term, the guest of honor this evening. What do you know about her?
Oh, the poor girl. She's an only child, and her parents passed away just recently.
Yes, I feel for her. An enormous inheritance, and all of a sudden no one around to tell her how to spend it. The family, they were industrialists, were they not?
That's right, though by the end they were into pretty much everything. Manufacturing, banking, real estate, and more. They were a bit close-lipped about their net worth, but certainly one of the richest private families in the empire.
And if I recall correctly, they were a new money family, too. Money-grubbing upstarts. I think I heard them called at court from time to time.
Did you really? I don't doubt it, of course. My word, that place can be just so beastly sometimes.
Actually, I thought that was rather tame. You should hear the things they call me.
Oh yes, they can say such horrid things about widows like us. Sometime you and I will have to swap stories of the more creative ones. When the circumstances are more pleasant, of course.
Of course. On a small table near the center of the room sat a little book, the kind one could write in. Could it be a diary? And by reading it, might I steal a forbidden glimpse into the inner life of some member of the once mighty Lee family? But to my great disappointment, I found the pages empty. Ah, well, I suppose that hoping to discover the defiant last words of the infamous Lamika Lee written in blood really would have been a bit much to ask for. I couldn't make out the lady in the ruined portrait, but I assumed it must be some grand old dame of the Lee household. Why had she been left behind, I wondered? Had the rest of the family simply not liked her? Mind you, if I ever had to sell one of my estates, I'd rather fancy leaving behind as many self-portraits as I could spare. You know, just so that the new owners would feel like I was keeping an eye on them. A set of old vases sat on the dresser. Could there possibly still be anything in them? The neck of the nearest vase was too narrow for me to see anything inside at a glance. I suppose I could have stuck my hand in to feel around, but there could easily be a mouse or a spider lurking in there. No, that would be a much more suitable job for Miss Charisse and those small, dainty hands of hers, I think. When I'd first arrived at the manor house, I thought it might rain that evening. And in light of recent events, I half expected a flash of lightning to provide an atmospheric backdrop to the stage of our little drama, complete with the clap of thunder as the applause. But the night air hung cold and still, and the only sound was the rustling of weeds and brush that clawed against the foundations of the building. Wait, rustling? But there isn't any wind. Who's that out there?
It's just me, Misfortune, ma'am.
I say, what in the world are you doing skulking about in the brush like that? Don't tell me they get you to do the groundskeeping around here, too.
Sometimes I do a bit of gardening, yes. You know, when things get out of hand.
Gardening? At a time like this?
Well, no, ma'am. Right now, I'm keeping an eye out for strangers, just to keep everyone safe.
What a relief. I do feel ever so much safer when a hulking man with an eye patch is lurking in the shadows right outside the house. Can you tell me anything about our late host? Perhaps about this grand announcement of his?
About the boss? I mean, the prince? Sorry, ma'am, but he wasn't the sort to confide in a mere valet like myself.
Oh, come now. I know how it is with servants. You're bound to have seen or heard a thing or two about the house, whether your master knows it or not.
Look, I take my duties seriously. I make it a point not to see things that I'm not supposed to see.
Yes, I suppose not seeing things would be rather a specialty of yours. Tell me, have you worked for the prince for a long time?
Yes, ma'am. Many years now.
And you're still just a valet? Tisk tisk. Promotions must be hard to come by in that household. So, you were in quite the tizzy when you came running to find me earlier. Was it you who found the body?
Yes, ma'am. I found it in the hall, just like you saw.
And what were you doing before that?
Well, I let the boss, the prince, into the hall to take his phone call. Then I went to the pantry to get more candles for the dining room. I didn't know how long Horatio was going to be with the lights.
So, the prince was alone then when you left him in the hall?
Yes, ma'am. Without a doubt.
Why then, it appears you may have been the last one to see the poor prince alive.
Wouldn't that actually have been the killer, ma'am?
I suppose so. But then, you did just say you were quite certain he was alone.
What do you mean by that? I'm just doing my job here.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm sure you're quite excellent at, well, whatever it is that valets do. That's right. In all this commotion, I'd almost forgotten the whole reason the prince left us was to take a phone call. Do you know who was calling?
No, ma'am, I don't.
Well, that's a little odd. They didn't give a name.
I asked, but they said the matter was confidential.
So you spoke to them then. Can you describe anything at all about the caller?
Yes, I took the call, and they asked for the prince right away. Which is a bit funny, now that you mention it. I didn't think very many people would have this number. Anyway, pretty sure the caller was a woman. She was all crisp and businesslike, too. I'm afraid I can't tell you more than that.
I suppose it would be too much to hope that this rotting old place would have call display.
No, ma'am. It's a wonder most of the wiring around here even works at all.
Must be magic, I suppose. My dear Clops, please tell me you didn't really think there might still be a stranger lurking around here in the underbrush?
Well, ma'am, no one was watching the door when the prince was in the hall. Whoever did it could have run right out the front door.
Why, indeed they could have. Not much gets by you, it seems. And yet, here you are, searching through the weeds at the base of the house. With the coast clear, would our furtive stranger not just have kept going?
I'm sure he probably did. I'm just looking for footprints.
Oh, footprints now. Ah, yes, of course. And have you found any?
No, ma'am.
More's the pity. It would have been so much nicer to believe the killer was no longer in the house. Especially with our resident bodyguard busy traipsing through the muck outside.
Sorry, ma'am, but I'm just a valet.
Of course you are. There were stories from the time of the Revolutionary War that when soldiers first stormed the grounds of the Lee Manor, ferocious spectral beasts appeared out of nowhere to tear apart the terrified trespassers. Of course, you can't believe everything you hear. But I found myself keeping a watchful eye on the wolf statues in the courtyard, just to be sure. Clops claimed he had already checked the ground around the house for footprints. But I thought it couldn't hurt to double-check. Apparently I thought wrong, though, for as I stepped off the path into the brush, the weeds and thorns tore at my skirts and scratched my ankles. You know, I think I'll just take the one-eyed brute's word for it after all. A rundown shed sat in the corner of the yard. Gingerly, I tried the door, but the wood had swollen, and it seemed stuck in its frame. It was just as well, I suppose. Blech. Why would I want to go inside a moldy old shed anyway?